Well, physicists have always kept the observer out of the picture. And quantum physics is shockingly reminding us that our description of the world is always the description from the point of view of an observer. So we are forced to take the observer seriously into account. And take the observer seriously into account means realizing that awareness, experience is the primary stuff the world is made of. And the assumption that matter is what the world is made of is inconsistent with the results of quantum physics. No, I don't think it's real. Physicists have struggled with that for a long time. The collapse of the wave function is incompatible with some deep fundamental principles of quantum physics. And the best contemporary understanding of that is that there is no collapse of the wave function. All we need is to explain why it looks as if there is one. The most common interpretation of it nowadays is that as a consequence of the macroscopic nature of the observer, the fine quantum correlations which are there in the actual wave function kind of gets lost, gets hidden. And let's say it's the so-called decoherence approach to the quantum measurement problem. And I worked on that. I worked on actually the beginning of that in the late 60s. But I'm now convinced that the argument in itself is impeccable, but it doesn't touch the philosophical bottom of the issue. There's a deeper reason why that is so. And that has to do with the fact that all we have is the world as seen by embodied observers. That is, all our experiences of the world correspond to some happening in the world. We're not seeing the universe from the point of view of God standing outside. We're inside it. And inside the universe, which appears to be there out of our experience of it. The fact that this experience is always located within the universe and related to some change happening in the world is actually the deeper reason why the wave function appears to collapse. Ultimately, there is no collapse. All these realities are simultaneously there. Yeah, this is why the world appears classical to us, even though we know that it's not ultimately consistent to assume a classical world. There are things like the double slit experiment which force us to realize that that's not the ultimate nature of things. But still the world does appear classical to us. We can rely on the fact that I can quietly assume that the chair is there and will stay there while we're talking. Amongst the infinite possibilities which are simultaneously there in the quantum state, always one is realized, and from the point of view of a specific observer. And when two observers meet, in the overlap of their perception, there is a consistency. All this is connected to the fact that all experiences leave a trace in the world. They are connected to some. The nature of experiences as we know it is connected with trace formation, or with information being recorded and being potentially available. The most immediate description of that would be like something is happening in the observer's brain. There's a lot more than that, but at least that will be there. The information is recorded, and so it's potentially available. It could be in a machine, and potentially an observer could access it. But already by being there and being available, that causes, let's say, the apparent collapse, that causes the world to appear classical. The question that we have to answer is always eventually like, what experiences some observer will have. So when we say that something is recorded in a machine, we imply that at some point potentially an observer could access that information. That's the crucial factor. Let's say the wave function of the universe contains all possible experiences. But we always experience the world from a specific point of view. I can only see through these eyes. As much as I can empathize with you, I can never see the world through your eyes. And all my experiences are localized within this particular object in the world, which is my body. We exist as embodied observers. And that's the crucial factor which makes the world appear objective to us. There's a step there which is a bit complex or a bit technical. The equivalence I'm talking about between, let's say, Vishnu's dream of all possible universes being simultaneously there, and a specific universe which appears like solid classical reality, depends, as I said before, on experience corresponding to information being recorded, or trace formation. In physics, there are some interesting experiments with quantum physics showing that when I can erase that trace, when I can erase that information, and that's a specific thing of quantum physics, that information can be erased. In classical physics, information can never be erased. In quantum physics, yes. When that information gets erased, the superposition of all possibilities comes back. But when the information is conserved, then they appear as either or. Only one possibility can be realized at one time.
And this experientially,
let's say what I'm referring to is a set of experiments called like the quantum eraser, and there's another interesting series which is called quantum beats. They all show that when when the final state of a system is such that information about a previous process is recorded there and potentially accessible, that process will appear as an either-or, as like classical reality. When the information is erased, the quantum superposition will come back. All possibilities will be simultaneously there again. The two things are connected in a way, but not as directly or naively as normally understood in let's say, New Age terms. They are connected in the sense that eventually, whatever may be the intermediate step, things can be recorded in a computer, in a machine, or whatever. But we only know the world that's experienced by some observer. So eventually there will be an observer looking at the machine or whatever it is. That means some neuron firing pattern in an observer brain will happen, and that will be a trace. So irrespective of how many, there will be a zillion traces left in the world before we get to somebody's brain, because we are macroscopic objects, a macroscopic system, and there's all kinds of steps in between. But whatever may be the intermediate steps, eventually at some point, some information recording will happen in somebody's brain, or body, because brain is only a simplification of the thing. But so in this sense, it's essential. The presence of the observer is essential. But it's not, we shouldn't understand it naively as consciousness collapses the wave function, because there is no collapse. The wave function does not collapse. What I mean by localized is that there will be some physical change happening in the world, which is related, mirroring our experience in the world. What that means in terms of space and time, that's a difficult question, because our understanding of space and time is still very limited. We are beginning to understand that they may not be ultimate constituents of reality. So I would suspend any statement about the space-time localization. The essential point is that we are in a special relationship with this physical system that we call a body, a human body, or the body of a conscious being, whatever that may be. We have very vague idea about the boundaries of conscious. But anyway, it's like world is there as experienced by some experiencer. I think quantum physics is undoing old prejudices, or inviting us to let go of presumed understandings of what the world is like. I don't think it can tell us anything about consciousness per se, because consciousness is really what quantum physics is built on. We build quantum physics to connect experiences, but the ultimate reality we can rely on is only experiences, experiencing. So consciousness is the primary fact. And quantum physics is a way, let's say quantum physics is one possible way of understanding the overlaps of consciousness of different observers. Our experiences of the world overlap in such a way that the world appears to have structure and coherence. And quantum physics is one way of understanding that structure. I've always loved that book. It's people say, like, if you were stranded on a desert island, which book would you take with you? I would take Laozi. And it's curious. We don't even know whether Laozi existed. Probably not. But he would not have minded people thinking that he doesn't exist. Because actually, one thing that's recorded about him is that he tried to erase personal information throughout his life. The first chapter of Laozi's book, of the Tao Te Ching, is an extremely dense formulation of some very fundamental realizations about the nature of reality, and can be read at many different levels. The first verse, which is like so crucial, is like Dao ke Dao fei chang Dao. The Dao that can be expressed is not a constant Tao, or it's not the eternal Tao, it's not the ultimate Tao, which on one level it's like the realization that all postmodern thinking is based on. It's like we only have maps of reality. All our discourse is discourse about reality. We don't and the map is not the territory, as Kodzybski realized. So on one level, the Tao that can be talked about, interesting that word talk is one of the meaning of Tao itself. So the Chinese verse is Dao ke Dao. We could translate it as the Tao that can be Taoed is not the Tao. As soon as you hold on to any one representation of reality, you've missed it. So on one level, that invites us to be aware that we are dealing in representations of reality, and reality is beyond all representations. But there's many layers to Laozi's message. And the second verse says, any name that can be named is not a constant name. And the third verse is, without name is the origin of heaven and earth. With name is the mother of the 10,000 things. So that naming, on one level, points to representations of reality, to discourse about reality. But on a deeper level, it points to the fact that in experiencing, the world appears to stand in front of us as other, as an objective world out there, and me as an observer in here. That split, that apparent split of the unity of experience into subject and object is, I believe, the deeper meaning of Laozi's naming. So when he says, without name, the origin of heaven and earth, with name, the mother of the 10,000 things, he means as soon as that split is there, and that split is intrinsic to the nature of experience as an embodied observer, so it's not something that we could do without. As soon as that is there, the world appears to be made of things. The world appears solid, classical, and made of 10,000 things, of the myriad realities. And the next verse from this, let's say, very ontological statement moves closer to our personal experience when he says, therefore, without desire, you experience the mystery of reality. With desire, you experience the boundaries. You experience form, you experience distinction, you experience the 10,000 things. Desire is the motion of the I, is the movement of the separate I, which is seeking fulfillment, seeking happiness. Buddha says, the first noble truth of Buddha is like, existence is suffering, where existence comes from Latin existere, standing out. Standing out as an I, as a separate self, is suffering, is intrinsically bound to frustration, because the separate self is impermanent. The separate self is not ultimately real. So we're attached to this unreality, which will eventually dissolve back into the whole. There's a paradox there. And that's Laozi is pointing to that paradox in the last verse of that first chapter, which essentially says that there's no difference between the naming and the unnamed. The naming arises within the unnamed, and is only from the separate point of view of the named. Naming and the unnamed appear different. From the point of view of the unnamed, naming and the unnamed are the same. Laozi says, these two, and these two means like named and unnamed, desire and desirelessness, arise together, but we name them differently. Holding them together is the door to all wonders. I think that's a very compact formulation of what we call the spiritual path, or whatever, realizing.